The sky above had always been purple. For thousands of years they had watched it change from light violet at dawn to deep plum at night. They knew every star, every cloud pattern, every sign of coming rain. The sky was their oldest friend, their constant companion, their connection to the divine. So when the sky cracked open like a broken egg, every on the planet stopped what they were doing and looked up. Old Keeper dropped his farming tool and fell to his knees. Around him, others did the same. Their ancient books had spoken of this day. The prophecy said that one day the heavens would open and beings of great power would descend to guide into a new age of wonder. The crack in the sky grew wider. Light poured through it brighter than any sun, and from that light came shapes, metal shapes, ships. They were not beautiful. They were not shining with holy radiance. They were burned and broken, held together with patches and desperate repairs. Smoke trailed behind them like wounded animals leaving blood in snow. The first ship landed in the great meadow outside the city of. It hit the ground hard, sliding through the purple grass and leaving a scar in the earth. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a door opened with a loud grinding sound and figures emerged. They gasped. These beings walked on two legs like them, but they were smaller. Their skin came in different shades of brown and pink. They wore strange clothes and carried strange objects, and their faces showed something they had not expected to see on the faces of gods. Fear, exhaustion, hunger. Park was the first to step fully onto soil. He was the captain of the lead vessel, the Horizon's Edge. Behind him came his crew, blinking in the purple sunlight, breathing air that smelled like flowers they had never known. Looked at the crowd of gathering around them. The aliens were tall and thin, with skin the color of silver bark and large, gentle eyes that reflected the purple sky. They were beautiful in a strange way, and they were all kneeling. "Captain," whispered the ship's chief diplomat. She stood beside him, her voice shaking. "They think we're gods." Watched as an old crawled forward on his knees, tears streaming down his silver face. The alien reached out and touched the edge of his boot, then pressed his forehead to the ground. "Divine ones," the old said in a language that somehow the human translation devices could understand. "We have waited so long for you. The prophecy has come true. You have descended from the heavens to save us." Felt sick. He had not come here to save anyone. He had come here because Earth was dying. The air had become poison, the water had turned to acid, and the wars over the last clean resources had killed billions. He and his people were not saviors. They were refugees. They were desperate, starving, homeless survivors who had traveled across the stars with nothing but hope and prayers. And now these innocent beings thought they were gods. "Please stand," said, his voice rough from exhaustion. "Please, all of you, stand up." But they would not stand. More arrived by the minute. They came from the city, from the farms, from villages far away. They brought food and water and gifts. They sang songs of worship. They wept with joy. Tried to explain. "We are not divine beings," she said, speaking slowly so the translation devices could work properly. "We are humans. We come from a planet called Earth. Our world is dying. We had to leave. We are just travelers looking for a new home." But the only smiled and nodded, as if this was exactly what gods would say. Of course the divine ones would be humble. Of course they would pretend to be ordinary. This only proved how holy they truly were. By evening, the humans had been led into the city of. It was a beautiful place, built from white stone that seemed to glow in the fading light. Towers reached toward the purple sky, covered in climbing flowers. Rivers of clean water ran through the streets. The air smelled sweet and clean, so different from the choking atmosphere of dying Earth. They gave them everything. Food was brought in endless amounts, strange fruits and vegetables that tasted like nothing the humans had ever known. Clean water, actual clean water, filled their cups. Soft beds were prepared in the finest buildings. They refused to let the humans work or struggle for anything. "You must rest, divine ones," they said. You must recover from your journey through the heavens. We will take care of everything." That night sat alone on a balcony, looking up at the unfamiliar stars. His crew was sleeping for the first time in months without fear. Children who had known only the recycled air of ships were breathing real atmosphere. Old people who had expected to die in space were eating fresh food. He should have been happy. Instead, he felt a weight pressing down on his heart. Found him there, staring at the sky. "The other ships have landed safely," she reported. "All 12 vessels. Everyone survived the descent." "Good," said quietly. Sat beside him. "You're troubled." "Aren't you?" He looked at her. "They worship us. They think we're divine beings sent to guide them. We're lying to them just by existing." We tried to tell them the truth. "And they didn't believe us," shook his head. "So what do we do except their worship, take their food and their homes and their reverence, build a kingdom on their faith? We could try again tomorrow, keep explaining. Eventually they'll understand." In the city below could see still celebrating. Music floated up from the streets. Lights danced in windows. They were so happy, so full of hope. They believed salvation had come at last. "We didn't come here to be," said softly. "We came here to survive." "Maybe," replied, "we can do both without taking advantage of them. Maybe we can show them who we really are, not through words but through actions." "And who are we really?" Thought about it. She thought about the long journey, the years in space, the losses and the sacrifices. She thought about the children who had been born between stars, never knowing solid ground. She thought about the engineers who had kept the ships flying with creativity and courage. She thought about the doctors who had healed the sick with almost no supplies. She thought about ordinary humans doing extraordinary things just to survive one more day. "We're people," she finally said. "Just people. We make mistakes. We get tired. We fight and argue, and sometimes we're selfish. But we also love. We also sacrifice. We also hope." She paused. "Maybe that's not so bad. Maybe people are enough." Looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in months, he almost smiled. Below them, a young scholar named watched the balcony from the street. He had studied the ancient texts all his life, memorizing every word of the prophecy. Divine beings would descend from the heavens, the text said. They would be perfect and powerful and wise beyond measure. But had watched the beings called humans all day. He had seen them stumble with exhaustion. He had seen them cry when they tasted fresh food. He had seen a human mother hold her sick child with fear in her eyes, real fear, the kind that gods should never feel. These beings bled, they suffered, they were afraid. They were not gods. And somehow, that made more curious about them than any god could ever have made him. He walked home slowly, thinking hard. Tomorrow he would ask to meet them. Tomorrow he would learn the truth. Tomorrow he would begin to understand what had really fallen from the sky. Because whatever these humans were, they were something new, something the prophecy had never predicted. Something real. 6 months had passed since the humans fell from the sky. The settlement they built was called New, named after a city on their lost. It sat in the valley below, a growing collection of buildings made from stone and human metal. Doctor stood in the center of a small village, surrounded by curious silver faces. In her hands, she held 2 wires connected to a simple battery. She touched the wires together, and a small light bulb glowed to life. They gasped as if they had witnessed a miracle. "It's not magic," said patiently. "It's electricity, energy that moves through metal. Anyone can learn to make it work." But they fell to their knees anyway, praising the divine gift of light. Sighed. This happened every time. No matter how carefully she explained the science, they saw only wonders performed by holy beings. Back in New, Captain faced a different problem. Lieutenant stood before him, arms crossed, jaw tight. Was the head of security, a hard man who had survived the worst of Earth's final wars. He had kept people alive through violence and difficult choices. He did not believe in kindness without cost. "They want to worship us," said bluntly. "So let them worship us. We need food. We need resources. We need workers to help build this colony. Their faith gives us all of that for free." "It's not free," replied. "We would be paying with lies. Lies that help everyone. They are happy, they feel fulfilled, and we survive. Where is the harm?" Stepped forward. She had been listening quietly, but now she spoke with force. "The harm is that it's wrong. We didn't cross the stars to become false gods. We came here to find a new home, not to build an empire on deception." Easy words from someone who's never had to make the hard choices, shot back. "I've made plenty of hard choices," said coldly. "I watched my family die on Earth because there weren't enough ships. Don't talk to me about hard choices." The argument went nowhere. Left angry and could see that others in the colony agreed with him. The worship made life easy. Why fight against it? But N had a different plan. They called it demystification. They would show through actions and examples, that humans were not gods. They were just people, with all the weaknesses and flaws that came with being mortal. The first step was opening the Human Medical Center to visitors. The young scholar was among the first to come. He walked through the rooms, watching human doctors treat human patients. He saw bandages and medicine. He saw pain and healing. He saw a man with a broken leg screaming as doctors set the bone. "Gods do not scream," said Tu, who had become his main teacher. "No," she agreed. "They don't. We're not gods, we're just people who happen to come from another world." "Then why did you come from the sky? The prophecy says that only divine beings can open the heavens." Thought about how to explain. "Our world was dying," she said. "The air became poison. The water became dangerous. We had to leave or we would all die. We built ships and flew into space looking for somewhere safe to live. We opened the sky because we had the technology to do it, not because we are divine." Was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "What is technology?" Smiled. She liked this question. Technology is knowledge turned into tools. Anyone can learn it, even. Over the following weeks began teaching and the basics of human science. She showed them how electricity worked, how engines turned fuel into motion, how radio waves carried voices across distances. Some struggled to understand. Others refused to believe that holy powers could be learned like farming or cooking. But a few, embraced the knowledge with hungry minds. Then the plague came. No one knew where it started. Perhaps a human virus had mutated in the alien environment. Perhaps something was dangerous to human bodies. Whatever the cause, people began getting sick. First a few, then dozens. Fever burned through the settlement. Bodies grew weak. Medicine ran low. The watched in confusion. Why did the divine beings suffer? Why did their holy healers fail to cure their own people? Why did children die? Stood in the cemetery as the latest graves were dug. 17 humans had died in the past week, including 4 children. The smallest grave belonged to a boy of 3 years, born on the ship during the long journey. He had survived the voyage across stars only to die from a fever on a new world. His mother knelt beside the grave, weeping without sound. Other humans gathered around, faces gray with grief, and beyond them watched, hundreds of them, silent and still. Old Keeper approached. The ancient's face showed deep confusion. "Why do the divine ones weep?" he asked. "Why do your children die? Gods cannot die." Looked at the old man. He was so tired. His bones ached with exhaustion and sorrow. He had no strength left for careful words or diplomatic explanations. "Because we are not gods," he said simply. "We never were. We are just people. We get sick. We grow old. We die. We came to because our home was destroyed and we had nowhere else to go. You saved us. You gave us food and shelter when we had nothing. We owe you a debt we can never repay." Stared at him. For a long moment the old said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched his face. His silver fingers were cool against human skin. You weep for your dead, said softly. You feel pain, you suffer. He paused. You are like us. Yes, whispered, we are like you. Looked at the graves, at the weeping mother, at the tired humans standing in the purple grass. Something changed in his ancient eyes. The worship faded. In its place came something else. Compassion. Then you are our brothers, said. Not our gods, our brothers, and brothers help each other. He turned to his people and spoke in a loud, clear voice. These are not divine beings. They are travelers lost and far from home. They saved themselves through courage and skill, not holy power, but they are good. They refuse to take advantage of our faith. They tried to tell us the truth and we would not listen. Now we must listen. Now we must see them as they truly are. They murmured among themselves. Some looked disappointed, their dreams of divine salvation crumbling, but others nodded slowly, understanding. The humans had been humble. The humans had been honest. That meant something. Stepped forward and stood beside. I have studied with them, he announced. They have taught me their knowledge freely without asking for worship or payment. They share what they have. They explain their mysteries. They treat us as equals, not as servants. He paused. That is worth more than any prophecy. The funeral continued. Humans and stood together as the small graves were covered with purple soil. The mother's weeping slowly quieted. Hands reached out to comfort her, silver and brown together. 1 week later, the High Council of requested a formal meeting, and traveled to the great chamber where the council sat. They expected demands, accusations, perhaps anger at the deception. Instead, the head counselor rose and bowed her silver head. We offer you alliance, she said, not as servants to gods but as equals to fellow survivors. You came to us with nothing. You refused to exploit our faith. You shared your pain with us openly. You have proven yourselves worthy of friendship. Let us move forward together as partners. Felt tears forming in his eyes. He bowed in return. We accept, he said, with gratitude. That night, for the first time, humans and shared a meal as true equals. There was no kneeling, no worship, no uncomfortable reverence. There was only food and laughter and the beginning of real friendship. Raised her cup, to, she said, our new home. Raised his cup in return. To humanity, he replied, our new family. The glasses touched with a gentle sound, and the night stretched on, full of hope. 2 years after the humans landed on, the warning came. Commander Shin sat in the small control room of Nu, staring at the sensor screen. She had checked the readings 5 times. Each time the answer was the same. Something was coming, something big. She called immediately. 30 ships, she reported, her voice flat and controlled. Military formation, they'll reach in 12 days. Felt his stomach drop. Who are they? Unknown, but they're not hiding, they want to be seen. Pulled up the transmission that had accompanied the sensor contact. A face appeared on the screen. It was not human, it was something else entirely. The creature had gray skin covered in scales. Its eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils. When it spoke, its voice sounded like stones grinding together. I am Supreme Overseer of the Dominion. We have detected a primitive world in this sector. According to Dominion law, all primitive species are property of the Empire. Prepare your world for processing. Resistance will result in extermination. The message ended. Silence filled the control room. What is the Dominion? Asked. Had spent the past 2 years collecting information from every source she could find. She had contacted other species through long-range communication, traded information for technology, built a picture of the galaxy beyond. What she had learned was not encouraging. They're an empire, she explained. One of the biggest in this region of space. They conquer primitive worlds and take everything of value, resources, technology, and people. They use the populations as slaves, or, if the species is considered worthless, they simply destroy them. And they think is primitive. Is primitive by their standards. No space travel, no advanced weapons, no galactic communication. They never developed those things because they never needed to. They lived in peace. Paused. The Dominion sees peace as weakness. Looked at the sensor display. 30 warships. The human settlement had 3 vessels capable of flight, and only 2 of those had any weapons at all. The math was simple. The math was hopeless. "Can we run?" he asked. "We could load everyone onto the ships and try to escape before they arrive, but we'd have to leave them behind. And honestly, I don't know if we'd make it. Those ships are fast." Thought of the old keeper who had been the first to call them brothers. He thought of who had become like a son too. He thought of the thousands of who had welcomed humanity with open arms, who had shared their food and their homes and their world. "We can't leave them," he said quietly. "They saved us. They gave us everything when we had nothing." I know's face was hard, "So we fight." "With what? 3 ships against 30. "With whatever we have, and with whoever will stand beside us." The emergency council meeting was held that evening. Humans and gathered together in the great hall of, when explained the threat, the fell silent. They had no word for war. Their language contained terms for disagreement, for argument, for competition. But they had never experienced organized violence on a large scale. The concept of an invading army was as foreign to them as flying had once been to fish. Spoke first, "What do they want with us?" "Everything," said bluntly. "Your world, your resources, your people. They will take what they can use and destroy what they cannot." "Why? We have done nothing to them." "That doesn't matter to the Dominion. They take because they can. They conquer because they are strong. That is their only law." Rose slowly, his old body trembling. "Then what can we do? We have no weapons. We have never fought. How can we stand against such evil?" Lieutenant stepped forward. His face was grim, but there was no longer anger in his eyes. The past 2 years had changed him. He had watched humans and work together, build together, become something new together. He had learned that there were things worth more than survival. "You stand with us," he said. "Humans know how to fight. We've been doing it for our entire history. It's not something we're proud of, but it's something we're good at. Let us teach you." "You would fight for us?" a counselor asked in disbelief. "But you could flee, you could save your own people." Answered, "And go where? Another strange world where we would have to start over as strangers. No, this is our home now. You made it our home. We will not abandon you." Stood and faced the assembly. "I won't lie to you, our chances are bad. We are outnumbered and they have more experience than we do. Many of us will die, maybe all of us. But if we don't fight, they will take everything. They will enslave your children. They will strip your world. They will erase your culture. The Dominion does not show mercy. So we have nothing to lose by fighting except our lives, and we have everything to lose by surrendering." The silence stretched on, looked at each other, fear and uncertainty in their silver eyes, then stood. "I will fight," he said simply. "Has taught me that knowledge can be turned into tools. She showed me how electricity works, how machines function. I understood that these things are not magic. If fighting is the same, if it can be learned like any other skill, then I will learn it." Other began to rise, young ones mostly, but also some older. Farmers, craftsmen, teachers, artists. None of them had ever held a weapon. None of them had ever imagined violence. But they rose anyway, one by one, until half the hall was standing. Was the last to stand. His old body shook with the effort, but his voice was steady. "I am too old to fight," he said, "but I can help in other ways. I can organize supplies. I can tend to the wounded. I can pray for our success, even if I no longer pray to gods. I will do what I can." Nodded with respect. "Every contribution matters. We'll need everyone." Over the following days, Nu transformed into a factory of war, and her engineering team worked around the clock, adapting human weapons technology for mass production. They couldn't build starships in 12 days, but they could build rifles. They could build explosives. They could build shields and armor and traps. took charge of training. He gathered every human who had military experience and set them to teaching the basics of combat, how to hold a weapon, how to take cover, how to fight as a unit instead of as individuals. They were terrible at first. They flinched at loud noises. They hesitated before shooting targets. The concept of deliberately harming another living being went against every instinct they had. But they learned. Slowly, painfully, they learned. Pilot O led the space defense planning. He had been a fighter pilot in Earth's final wars, one of the few who survived the chaos. Now he commanded humanity's tiny air force, 2 armed shuttles and a converted cargo vessel with guns welded to its hull. "We can't win in a straight fight," he told, "so we don't fight straight. We hide in the asteroid belt. We hit them fast and hard, then disappear before they can respond. Guerrilla tactics. Make them bleed for every step they take." Approve the plan. It was desperate, but everything was desperate now. On the final night before the Dominion fleet arrived, walked through the settlement. Everywhere he looked, he saw preparation, loading supplies, humans checking weapons, children being gathered into shelters, old people sharing what might be their final meals. He found sitting alone on a hillside, looking up at the stars. "Scared?" asked sitting beside him. "Terrified," admitted. "I never imagined I would hold a weapon. I never imagined I would have enemies. My whole life I studied old books and dreamed of understanding the universe. Now I might die tomorrow." "You might," agreed. "We all might, but we might also win. Stranger things have happened." Turned to look at him. "You showed us you are not gods. Now show us what humans truly are." Thought about it for a long moment. What were humans, really? Conquerors, survivors, monsters, heroes. They were all of those things and none of them. They were complicated, contradictory creatures who could create beautiful art and terrible weapons with equal skill. "We're stubborn," he finally said. "That's what we are. When everything tells us to give up, we refuse. When the odds are impossible, we fight anyway. Maybe it's foolish. Maybe it's brave. I don't know, but we don't surrender easily, and we don't abandon our friends." At dawn, the Dominion fleet entered the system. 30 warships, bristling with weapons, flying in perfect formation. Supreme Overseer broadcast his final demand. "Surrender now and your processing will be merciful. Resist and you will be destroyed." Stood in the command center, surrounded by her tiny fleet's crew. She opened a channel to respond. "They expect primitives," she said, her voice hard as steel. "Let's teach them what refugees can do." The battle began at sunrise. Pilot O led his tiny squadron out of the asteroid belt where they had been hiding. 2 armed shuttles and 1 cargo ship against 30 Dominion warships. The math was suicide, but math had never stopped humans before. The Dominion fleet moved in standard formation, their flagship at the center, surrounded by cruisers and destroyers. They were confident. They had done this 100 times before. Primitive worlds always fell the same way, with screaming and fire and the satisfying crunch of resistance being ground into dust. Knew he couldn't destroy them, but he could hurt them. He could make them angry, and angry enemies made mistakes. His shuttle dove through the asteroid field at maximum speed, weaving between rocks that the Dominion sensors struggled to track. The cargo ship followed a different path, circling around to attack from behind. The second shuttle held position, waiting for its moment. The first Dominion cruiser saw coming and opened fire. Plasma bolts turned asteroids into vapor. The purple space around lit up with weapons fire, but was fast and his ship was small. He slipped through the barrage like water through fingers. His weapons were not powerful. Human shuttles were never designed for combat, but at close range, even small guns could find weak points, aimed for sensors, for communication arrays, for anything exposed. He strafed the cruiser's surface, leaving burning scars across its hull. Then he was gone, vanishing back into the asteroids before they could target him. The cargo ship attacked the rear of the formation. Its welded-on guns were ugly and improvised, but they worked. 2 Dominion escorts lost their engines to the barrage. They drifted helpless as the cargo ship retreated. Supreme Overseer watched from his command bridge with growing fury. 3 tiny ships were making fools of his fleet. Primitives were not supposed to fight back. Primitives were supposed to kneel and accept their fate. "Destroy them," he ordered. "All ships break formation and hunt them down." It was exactly what wanted. The orderly Dominion formation scattered as ships chased after the human attackers. They entered the asteroid field without caution, their captains eager to prove themselves to the Overseer. Rocks struck their hulls. Collisions damaged their systems. And always, the human ships were there, darting and striking and vanishing. The second shuttle emerged from hiding and attacked the flagship directly. Its pilot, a woman named, flew straight at the massive vessel with no hesitation. Dominion guns tracked her, preparing to fire. She launched everything she had: missiles, plasma charges, even physical projectiles made from asteroid rock. Most were destroyed before they hit, but some got through. The flagship's forward sensors exploded in a spray of fire and metal. Died 3 seconds later, her shuttle vaporized by concentrated fire, but she had blinded the enemy's eyes. On the planet below, Commander Shin watched the battle through long-range sensors. Every death hurt, every loss cut like a knife, but she could not grieve now. The Dominion was coming to the surface. Landing craft dropped from the warships, carrying soldiers to begin the conquest. Thousands of Dominion troops, armored and armed, veterans of 100 invasions. They expected to find farmers with sticks. Instead, they found trenches. Had spent the past 12 days building defenses. Walls of stone reinforced with human steel. Hidden bunkers filled with weapons. Traps buried in the purple grass. Every approach to new and was covered by overlapping fields of fire. The first Dominion soldiers landed in the great meadow where humanity had first touched soil. They marched forward in perfect formation, confident in their strength. Gave the order. Human and defenders opened fire together. The Dominion soldiers fell by the dozens. Their armor was strong, but concentrated fire from multiple positions found gaps and weak points. They tried to advance and hit the traps. Explosives hidden beneath the soil threw bodies into the air. Pits covered with fake grass swallowed entire squads. For the first time in their long campaign of conquest, the Dominion army retreated. But they were not defeated. More landing craft descended. More soldiers poured onto the surface. They learned from the first attack, spreading out, using cover, adapting to the enemy's tactics. The battle became a grinding war of attrition, trench by trench, building by building. Fought in the southern line. His hands shook every time he pulled the trigger, but he did not run. Beside him, farmers and human soldiers crouched together, sharing ammunition and water. When a Dominion breakthrough threatened to flank their position, organized a counterattack. He had never led anything in his life, but in that moment, he did not hesitate. The counterattack succeeded. The Dominion troops fell back, looked at his hands covered in purple dust and blood. He was still shaking. In the medical center, Doctor worked without rest. The wounded came in endless waves, human and alike. She had never performed battlefield surgery before. Now she did it by instinct, cutting and stitching and praying that she was doing more good than harm. Old Keeper moved through the corridors, carrying water to the injured and comfort to the dying. His prayers had changed since the humans came. He no longer prayed to gods in the sky. He prayed to whatever force had brought such strange, brave, foolish beings to his world. The battle in space reached its climax. Shuttle was hit, its engines failing. He knew he had one attack left, one chance to make his death mean something. He aimed at the Dominion flagship and pushed his damaged ship to maximum speed. Saw him coming and laughed. One shuttle against his mighty vessel, foolish. But was not aiming at the weapons or the engines. He was aiming at the command bridge. At the windows where he could see the overseer standing, watching the battle with contempt. The shuttle struck with tremendous force. The bridge exploded. Fire consumed everything inside, died without ever understanding how a single primitive could have killed him. With their leader dead, the Dominion fleet fell into chaos. Captains argued over who should take command. Ships began to withdraw, unwilling to die for a cause that had already cost so much. On the ground, the Dominion assault faltered. Troops fought without coordination. Supply lines collapsed. By nightfall, the invaders held less territory than they had at dawn. But the battle was not over. The defenders were exhausted, their ammunition running low. One more major assault would break them. Came to with a desperate plan. During the years of building new, she had created an emergency device. An electromagnetic pulse generator powerful enough to disable all electronics in the region. It would kill every machine, every ship, every piece of technology within range, including the life support systems of the wounded in the medical center. Understood what was not saying. Using the device would save the colony, but it would kill dozens of patients who depended on machines to stay alive. And someone would have to stay behind to activate it manually, because the remote trigger would be destroyed by the pulse. "I'll do it," said quietly. "I built it, I should be the one." No, shook her head. "We need you, your knowledge is too valuable." Then who? 40 technicians volunteered. Humans and together, people who had worked in workshops, who understood the machines and what their sacrifice would mean. They knew they would not survive. They volunteered anyway. Stood before them, her eyes burning with tears she would not let fall. "I can't order you to do this," she said. A young technician named stepped forward. She had been one of students fascinated by human science. "You don't have to order us," she said. "We choose this, for our friends, for our home." At midnight, the Dominion prepared for their final assault. Fresh troops landed. Every remaining ship contributed soldiers. This would be the end. The defenders waited in their trenches, watching the enemy mass in the darkness. Stood beside, both of them wounded, both of them exhausted. She reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in us." "Thank you," he replied, "for being worth believing in." The Dominion charged. And then the sky lit up with white light. The electromagnetic pulse swept across the battlefield like a wave. Dominion equipment died in an instant. Their powered armor froze. Their weapons stopped working. Their vehicles crashed to the ground. Suddenly, an army of high-technology soldiers became men in useless metal suits, unable to see, unable to communicate, unable to fight. The defenders attacked. What followed was not a battle but a rout. Dominion soldiers surrendered by the hundreds. Those who tried to flee were cut down. Within an hour, the invasion was over. In the workshop where the pulse generator sat, 40 technicians lay still. They had died together, their hands on the machine that had saved their world. Humans and, side by side, their blood mixing on the floor. Dawn came. Survivors gathered in the ruins of New Central Square. They were covered in dust and blood, exhausted beyond words, but they were alive, and they had won. Stood on a broken wall and looked out at the crowd. Humans and warriors and civilians, the living and those mourning the dead. They had done the impossible. They had faced a galactic empire and refused to die. "Today we didn't fight for humanity or," he said, his voice hoarse but strong. "We fought for each other. We bled together. We sacrificed together. That's what makes us family now, not blood, not species, choice. We chose to stand together and together we won." Stepped forward, leaning on for support. His wound had reopened and red blood stained his silver skin. He laughed weakly. "Now I understand," he said, "why you refuse to be gods. Gods do not bleed for others, only friends do." Held him only family. Above them, the purple sky showed the first light of morning. The Dominion fleet was retreating, broken and humiliated. They would not return for a long time. The battle was over. The real work was about to begin. 10 years had passed since the Battle of. The planet had changed almost beyond recognition. Where once there had been small villages and quiet farms, now great cities rose toward the purple sky. Factories hummed with activity. Ships launched daily from spaceports that had not existed a decade ago. The peaceful world that had never known war now stood at the center of an alliance that spanned dozens of star systems. Admiral Shin stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Unity, looking out at the fleet gathered in space. Hundreds of ships from a dozen different species, all flying under the banner of the Alliance. She remembered the day she had commanded 3 battered shuttles against an empire. Now she led an armada. It had not been easy. The years after the battle were hard, filled with rebuilding and grief and difficult decisions. The Dominion had retreated, but they had not disappeared. Other threats emerged. Pirates and raiders saw the new colony as an easy target. Neighboring empires tested their defenses. Each challenge had to be met, each problem solved. But humanity had learned something important on Earth. They had learned how to survive, and now they shared that knowledge with their allies. Technology spread across the Alliance worlds like seeds carried by the wind. Inventions, freely given to any species that wanted them, transformed planets. Electricity lit homes that had known only fire. Medicine cured diseases that had killed for generations. Communication linked worlds that had never spoken to each other. The humans asked for nothing in return. Not worship, not payment, not power. They remembered what they had done for them when they arrived with empty hands and hungry children. They paid that debt forward to every new species that joined the Alliance. Was no longer captain. He served as Chancellor of the Alliance now, the first human to hold the position. His hair had turned gray, and his face showed the lines of a decade of struggle and responsibility. But his eyes were still clear, still burning with the same determination that had carried humanity across the stars. He stood in the great council chamber of Nu, addressing representatives from 30 different worlds. They had gathered to mark the anniversary of the battle, to remember those who had died and celebrate what had been built from their sacrifice. Sat beside him as she always had. She was the Alliance's chief diplomat now, respected across the galaxy for her wisdom and her honesty. Other species trusted her because she had never lied to them, never manipulated them, never treated them as anything less than equals. Lieutenant had retired from military service. The man who had once argued for exploiting worship now spent his days teaching young soldiers from a dozen species the arts of war and peace alike. He had learned that strength meant nothing without honor, and he taught that lesson to every cadet who passed through his academy. Had become something close to a legend. Her name was known on worlds she had never visited, spoken with reverence by scientists and engineers across the Alliance. She still worked in her laboratory, still invented new technologies, still refused to take credit for discoveries that other species developed from her teachings. When people called her a genius, she laughed and said she was just a person who liked solving problems. Stood in the council chamber preparing to speak. He was an elder now, his silver skin marked with the patterns of age, his body still bearing scars from the battle that had nearly killed him. He moved slowly, supported by a cane made from wood and human metal, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He looked out at the assembly. Humans and representatives from species that had not even known each other existed 10 years ago. They sat together, worked together, argued together, laughed together. They were not united by blood or culture or history. They were united by choice. Began to speak. When I was young, I studied the ancient prophecies of my people. I believed that one day gods would descend from the sky to save us. I believed this with all my heart. Then the humans came, and I learned that I was wrong. He paused, letting his words settle. They were not gods. They were tired, hungry, frightened people who had lost their home and everything they loved. They fell from the sky not because they were divine, but because they had no other choice. They landed on our world not to save us, but to save themselves. Looked at, and in all the humans he had known for the past decade. But something strange happened. These refugees, these survivors, these ordinary people began to do extraordinary things, not because they were special, but because they refused to be anything less than good. He stepped forward, his cane tapping on the stone floor. They could have exploited our worship. They refused. They could have taken our resources and left us to the Dominion. They refused. They could have built an empire on our gratitude. They refused. Again and again, when the easy path was open to them, they chose the hard path instead. When they could have taken, they gave. When they could have ruled, they served. When they could have fled, they stayed to fight. Tears formed in his ancient eyes, but his voice remained steady. I have watched these humans for 10 years now. I have seen their flaws. They argue with each other. They make mistakes. They can be stubborn and foolish and frustrating. They are not perfect. They were never gods. He smiled, a warm expression that transformed his weathered face. But they are something better than gods. They are people who choose every day to be good, not because some divine power commands them, not because they will be rewarded in some afterlife, but because they believe that goodness matters. They believe that kindness has value. They believe that strangers can become family if given the chance. Turned to face the assembly fully. When the sky opened above, we believed that salvation had arrived. We were wrong about what salvation looked like. It did not come in shining armor and holy light. It came in battered ships and tired faces. It came in the form of people who had lost everything and somehow found it in themselves to give even more. He raised his hand toward the humans in the crowd. This is humanity, not gods who demand worship, not conquerors who take what they want, just people. Wonderful, terrible, complicated people who chose to share what they had with strangers across the stars. That choice, made freely, made honestly, has changed my world. It has changed all of our worlds. The chamber was silent. Representatives from a dozen species sat in stillness, absorbing his words. So today, as we mark 10 years since the battle that could have destroyed us all, I want to thank them. Not for saving us, though they did. Not for teaching us, though they did that too. I want to thank them for showing us what beings can become when they decide to be better than they have to be. Bowed his silver head. Thank you, humanity, for falling from the sky, for refusing to be gods, for being our friends. The applause began slowly, then grew until it filled the chamber like thunder. Humans and a dozen other species rose to their feet, celebrating not a victory but a choice. The choice to be good, the choice to help, the choice to stand together instead of alone. Later that evening, walked through the central plaza of Nu. It had been rebuilt after the battle, larger and more beautiful than before. At its center stood a statue that had not existed in the early days, a human hand and a hand clasped together, reaching toward the stars. He paused beneath the statue, looking up at the purple sky he had come to love. The stars were beginning to appear, familiar now after so many years. Somewhere among them, Earth still orbited its sun, dead and empty, a monument to humanity's failures. But here, on this strange world under an alien sky, humanity had found something they had lost long ago. Not just a home, but a purpose. Not just survival, but meaning. Found him there, as she always did. Heavy thoughts, she asked. Just remembering, he smiled at her. We've come a long way. We have. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. In the plaza around them, children played. Human children and children and children from species that had joined the alliance in recent years. They chased each other and laughed and argued over games, the way children always had and always would. What do you think they'll remember about us? Asked. When we're gone, what story will they tell? Considered the question. I think they'll tell the truth, that we were people, flawed and foolish and sometimes cruel, but also brave and kind and willing to fight for what mattered. We weren't gods, we were something better. What's that? We were enough. Looked at her, at this woman who had stood beside him through everything. Through the long journey across stars, through the desperate early days on, through the battle and the building and the thousand small struggles of creating something new. She had never wavered. She had never given up. He took her hand. Yes, he said softly, we were. Above them, the sky that had once opened to deliver frightened refugees now shone with the lights of a thriving civilization. Ships moved between stars, carrying trade and travelers and hope. Messages flowed across light years, connecting worlds that had once stood alone. And somewhere in that vast network of light and life, the story of humanity spread. Not the story of gods who had descended to save a primitive world, but the story of survivors who had chosen to be kind, of refugees who had refused to take advantage of those who helped them, of ordinary people who had stood against an empire and won. The sky had opened, and through that wound in the heavens, humanity had not conquered a world. They had found a home and given one in return. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.